All right, so I got some pretty major updates here for you guys on the potential prospects of a rail strike that we have been keeping up with for months now, and this is not a positive development to say the least, especially coming from a president like Biden who has repeatedly said that he is the most pro-union president in modern American history. So here from CNN Business, they say Labor Secretary under the Biden administration says that Congress needs to block rail strikes without new deals. Okay, so we have been keeping up with this. If you want to go watch some of my previous videos breaking down in detail exactly what a lot of these union workers are asking for in these negotiations, which, keep in mind, they have actually not had a new contract for multiple years now, and they have been fighting for just the bare necessities, right? So they've been fighting for things like paid sick leave and just being able to spend time with their families and slight increases in pay, but just the basic bare necessities on top of just increasing safety standards, right? You have, because of this sort of neoliberal austerity and the cutbacks that a lot of these multi-billion-dollar rail companies have been imposing on these workers, you have just straight up dangerous situations where, you have these massive trains that are carrying, in some cases, hazardous materials, and they'll be going on these 15-hour runs or 15-hour plus runs with just a single person operating the train. So I mean, it's just horrific safety conditions and obviously just mass exploitation that is going on within these rail companies. Apologies for my dog and his squeaky toy right there. But anyways, so now we have this update here from the Biden administration where they are basically saying if, these rail companies and these unions are not able to reach a firm deal, which it currently does not look like they are on track to do, then we are going to basically undercut the union and destroy their one strategy that they have at their disposal in order to actually make those demands for better pay, better benefits, better working conditions, etc. If they do not have the ability to go on strike, regardless of the economic consequences, then you're basically just completely undercutting their ability to negotiate or use their collective bargaining rights in order to extract concessions from, again, a lot of these rail companies that are owned by motherfuckers like Warren Buffett and other Wall Street ghouls who are interested in absolutely nothing other than extracting maximum profits at the expense of not only these workers, but also potentially at the expense of the broader American economy. And keep in mind, a lot of these rail companies have been spending tens of billions of dollars on stock buybacks instead of making investments to upgrade our rail systems here in the United States, right? So, on top of this obviously being a union fight and a labor battle and, a glimpse into how much of a pro-union president Joe Biden actually wants to demonstrate himself to be, this is also just a broader commentary or a critique in terms of having some of our, basic national systems like rail, or whether it's, healthcare or any of these other industries, right? Having these operated by private for-profit companies. It is absolutely disastrous for the broader implications that this could have for the American economy. So with that being laid out here, let's just go ahead and get into some of the details. They say here that Labor Secretary Marty Walsh says that he hopes negotiators between railroads and some rail unions can reach a new labor deals and avert a possible strike. But he said without a deal, he expects Congress will step in and impose contracts on the unhappy rank-and-file union members. The statement is a blow to the union's leverage as they seek to win a contract that their membership will accept. And not only is it a blow for Congress to step in and force some sort of an agreement on these workers, not only is that a blow to their ability to engage in collective bargaining for those better pay and better benefits, etc., or etc., as many people in my comment section have corrected my pronunciation of that, etc. But anyways, not only is it a blow directly to these workers' ability to go on strike, but even just him coming out and saying this and saying that Congress will step in if it looks like we are headed for that strike as a legitimate potential outcome, then him just saying that basically completely undercuts whatever leverage they have in between now and when, the potential for this rail strike would actually take place. Because now you're basically just telling these rail corporations that they don't have to give in to any of the demands coming from these union negotiators, because they can just wait them out and then rely on Congress, which is, stacked full of a bunch of corporate-backed corrupt candidates and politicians within our government, and they can just rely on them to step in and force and impose a contract that is definitely going to be more favorable to the companies that own these rail lines than it would be to what the workers are currently asking for, right? So even just coming out and saying this is absolutely atrocious. But they continue here saying 2 rail unions reached a tentative labor deal with the railroads in September ahead of the strike deadline, only to have their membership vote against ratifying them because they were basically terrible deals, according to a lot of people who were actual railroad workers themselves. They say that Walsh was involved in a 20-hour bargaining session that reached tentative labor deals just hours before the September 16th strike deadline. He said failing new negotiated agreements, Congress would have to impose a contract on the union as a way to keep union members on the job. He said, quote, "If for some reason one of the unions doesn't get to an agreement with the companies, then Congress will have to take action to avert a strike in our country." Again, just completely undercutting the ability for these workers to actually make demands. They say that one of these two unions, track maintenance workers who belonged to the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division, is set to go on strike as soon as November 19th without a new deal. Now, I have another update in terms of the strike deadline here in a second, while the other, the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen, could walk out as soon as December 4th, and the BMWEED members voted 57% against the proposed deal, while members of the Signalmen voted 60% against the deal. So we do have an update here where it appears like U.S. Railroads Union extend the strike deadline to at least December 4th. Okay, so there's your little update there. It seems like they're sort of both getting on track here to avert this November 9th strike deadline, and that's going to be pushed back to December 4th. But again, what is it actually going to do to push back that strike deadline if you have the labor secretary under Joe Biden coming out and saying that these rail companies can just hold out and wait for that strike deadline, knowing that the closer we get to it, the more that Congress is going to feel the need to step in and act to prevent that rail strike. And keep in mind, I mean, again, they're going to get into a lot of the potential catastrophic consequences that would come from this strike, which would be absolutely massive to the American economy. I mean, effectively, it would shut down gigantic portions of the American economy, especially going into the holidays with Christmas and all of that. It would be an absolute economic disaster for the American economy, but that's the whole fucking point, right? The point of being able to go on strike as a union is so that you can cause economic damages to the company and therefore put pressure on them in order to meet your demands. That's the whole point of having a union. That's the whole point of going on strike. So the idea that, this corporate media outlet here, CNN, is going to get into, the details of how bad this would be for the American economy, you're kind of just glossing over the fact that, like, yes, that's kind of the whole point. That's how they're applying pressure on this company and on the broader American economy in order to give them the bare fucking minimum in terms of what they're asking for in these negotiations. But so they continue here saying that if any rail unions were to go on strike, all the rail unions, which together represent 110,000 members, would honor their picket lines and refuse to work, bringing the nation's freight railroads to a grinding halt. That would be a body blow to the U.S. economy, snarling, still struggling supply chains and triggering widespread bottlenecks and shortages. And again, notice how they point out how this would be disastrous for American supply chains, these unions going on strike, but they don't point out the fact that a lot of these rail companies, again, instead of investing in, expanding or, making more efficient our rail lines and our supply chains here domestically with these companies that are owned, again, by these Wall Street goons, they have been spending this money on fucking stock buybacks to enrich their wealthy shareholders. Okay, so even just the existence of these rail lines being owned by private for-profit companies, okay, that in and of itself has been disastrous over the last number of years for the broader implications of how secure and safe and reliable our supply chains are going to be, right? So the real, commentary here shouldn't be on, these scary, greedy workers over here are going to ask for too much and that's going to blow up the American economy. No, the real commentary here is that these greedy Wall Street, shareholder run corporations that operate these rail lines have been imposing austerity on these workers and on the broader American supply chain to extract as much profits as they possibly can and give them to their shareholders, spending their money on stock buybacks instead of actually investing in the actual rails, right? That's the real commentary here, but of course, they don't point that out here on CNN. They say that about 30% of U.S. freight, when measured by weight and distance traveled, moves by rail. Prices of goods from gasoline to food to cars could soar if the trains halt, and in addition, factories could be forced to shut down temporarily due to parts shortages. Goods that consumers want to buy during the holiday season could be missing from the store shelves. Again, the interpretation that CNN is trying to give you here is that, oh my God, this would be absolutely terrible, which it would be, but you should be afraid of this. You should support Congress stepping in to prevent these greedy workers from making these demands and going out on strike, right? When again, the reality here is that these economic catastrophic damages that could potentially come to the American economy, that's the whole point. That's how these workers get leverage in order to ask for the bare necessities, right? In order to ask for the bare minimum from these greedy corporations, right? That's the whole point of being able to go on strike, right? But they don't, mention that within this article, really. They continue here saying that At that time, Democrats refused to act to block a potential strike. They're talking about this previous deadline that we were at. Senator Richard Durbin, the second highest ranking Democrat in the Senate, told CNN at that time that, quote, "I don't think it's likely that we will intervene." He said that avoiding a strike depends on the parties in negotiations stepping up to the plate. So that would be a better line to actually be going with from the Biden administration. But they say a little bit more details here in terms of like what these deals and potential negotiations have been putting out here. They say that the deals that have been rejected are lucrative ones. Again, I mean, look at this corporate media framing here. The deals that have been rejected are lucrative ones. Who the fuck are you to say that these deals are lucrative? I mean, again, if you go and watch, like, More Perfect Union did a great breakdown where they actually interview a lot of these rail workers, and you get a perspective in terms of what they're going through. For CNN to turn around and say these deals are lucrative ones, the workers are voting them down at a lot of these unions, right? Clearly, it's not that lucrative if they're asking for the bare necessity, things like paid sick leave, being able to see their family, basic safety measures, shit like that, right? I mean, that's not lucrative. They're asking for the bare minimum, and this is how CNN chooses to portray it, right? It's not, lucrative when these, Wall Street-owned rail lines are extracting tens of millions or billions of dollars a year off of the backs of these workers, and, instead of investing that in the actual rail lines to shore up our supply chains and make sure that they're reliable, shipping that money off to Wall Street. I mean, they're not talking about that as if it's lucrative, or, the CEO pays, which I'm sure at these rail line companies are millions and millions of dollars a year for the CEO. That's not lucrative. No need to point that out. Just the fact that these greedy workers are rejecting these massively lucrative deals. I mean, completely ridiculous. They say that they include an immediate 14% raise with back pay dating to 2020. Keep in mind, that's when the deal was supposed to be reached in the first place, right? These rail companies have been stalling for multiple years now. So the fact that you're saying that they're going to get a 14% raise with back pay, yes, they deserve the back pay. I mean, what are you talking about here? That's, again, the bare minimum. They say they're also going to get pay raises totaling 24% during the 4-year life of the contracts, which run from 2020 through 2024. They also give union members cash bonuses of $1,000 per year. Oh, how fucking lucrative. I mean, Jesus Christ, man. They say all told, the back pay and bonuses will give union members an average payment of $11,000 per worker once the deal is ratified. Again, $11,000. We're talking about back pay from 2020, okay? Back pay from 2020, and you're talking about an $11,000 bonus, which they were already owed anyways, as if that's some sort of like a massive lucrative deal that they're getting. And how dare these workers be so greedy as to potentially jeopardize the American economy? I mean, absolutely atrocious framing here in this article. They say the pay was never the main sticking point in these negotiations. Again, those other factors that I was talking about. The main issue that led the rank and file of the BMWED and the signalmen is the lack of paid sick days and the rejected tentative labor agreements. Railroad management has already rejected their request to add sick days to the next tentative agreement in order to get a deal membership would ratify. Okay, keep in mind, just as a overall perspective in terms of where we're at on the global stage, I mean, this applies to many other basic policies that we have been on the left pushing for years now, right? I mean, keep in mind, we are one of the only major countries on the entire face of the planet that does not have guaranteed paid sick days across the board, across the entire country, right? And these workers are asking for that just within this one company, and they're still not getting it, right? They're rejecting adding sick days, okay? Paid sick days, something that average workers have absolutely no control over, whether or not they're going to get sick. And again, you have that added potential safety consequences from that as well. I mean, do you really want these workers being forced or pressured into coming into work sick as they, are barely able to stand up and they need to be going home and relaxing and trying to get better, right? You really want them to come to work sick as they're operating, in some cases, single person operated trains for 15 hours at a time? That's the type of conditions that you think are good and operable? I mean, again, just completely fucking ridiculous that this is even debatable whether or not these workers deserve this. But again, I mean, you look at the map here, right? Here you have the United States with 0 guaranteed paid medical leave or sick days. Basically, you have the United States right here, and I guess the only other major countries on earth where you could say they have 0 guaranteed paid sick days are like India, South Korea, Somalia over here. I mean, really, that's what we're talking about here. And then the rest of this blue on this map, is either 12 to 24 weeks of guaranteed paid medical leave or 24 weeks or more of paid sick days, okay? So, I mean, again, you look at this, the entirety of Western Europe over here, Russia, China, I mean, Iran over here, Iraq has more paid sick days than us. I mean, all of these different countries, Libya, Brazil down here, I mean, Peru and Bolivia and Mexico and Cuba, all of these different countries around the world have somehow managed to figure out to require paid medical leave for their workers. And yet the United States is sitting over here, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and somehow we can't afford that, or we can't, force our extremely wealthy and dominant corporations to just guarantee paid sick leave to workers. I mean, it's just, again, the broader picture of just the American economy, the way we have structured the society to the benefit of multinational capitalist enterprises is just completely ridiculous. And of course, again, now we have this added component of, them being backed by the same politicians that they frequently give campaign donations to, effectively bribes, and basically we just have a completely rotten to its core corrupted political system that is dominated and operated on to the behest of capitalists. So, I mean, this is the type of result that you're going to get here. But they continue and finish off here saying that in response to Walsh's comment, the BMWED said that it does not want or need Congress to step in. 100% correct. They got a quote here saying Congress should not have to intervene. The railroads should provide paid sick leave to its employees. Its statement said, yes, obviously, they have the money to do it, and it would literally cost them a penny of every dollar of record profits to provide it. Okay, keep that in mind. That is a statistical fact. Bernie Sanders brought this up as well during the earlier stages of these negotiations. It would literally cost them a penny of every dollar of record profits to provide it. That's what they're asking for again. Okay, so when the media out here, even CNN, this is the only reference here to how ridiculous in this entire fucking article, this is the only reference that CNN decided to include, pointing out what they're actually asking for and then comparing that to what these companies are actually making, right? 1 penny, 1 cent on the dollar of the record profits that they are shipping off to their shareholders and Wall Street ghouls that operate these companies, right? 1 penny on the dollar to provide the bare minimum to these workers, and they are still refusing to do it. Okay, so again, the idea that Congress would step in and do anything other than force these companies, right? If you're going to actually come forward with a Congress-backed deal to prevent a strike or the shutdown of the American supply chains here domestically, right? If you are going to do that, the way you would do it is by telling these companies and forcing them through legislation that you have to abide by the negotiations of these unions, right? You have to give in to their demands 100% because, again, they're not asking for a lot, okay? They're asking for the bare minimum, okay? So if anything, that's what Congress should do if they wanted to actually be pro-labor. But again, I have my doubts. So they continue here with continuing the quote saying, it's only 2% of what CSX, NS, and UP spent so far this year on stock buybacks. It's literally nothing to them, yet they refuse to provide it. So, I mean, again, just another point of reference there, right? It is only 2%. Okay, that's the cost that it would take for these companies to provide paid sick leave to their workers, okay? 2% of the total amount that they have been spending on stock buybacks, which in and of itself should just be illegal because it's just stock manipulation where you're buying back your own stocks in order to reduce the supply and jack up the price for your shareholders, okay? So you have billions, if not tens of billions of dollars to spend on stock buybacks over about the last decade, but you can't provide your workers with just paid sick leave, okay? And the back pay that they are owed because you guys have been stalling in these negotiations for literally years now. Okay, so I mean, again, Biden wants to claim he is the most pro-union president in modern American history. If his labor secretary, if Congress under his watch decides to force a deal on these workers that is not completely giving in to every single one of their demands, then that line, the idea that he is pro-labor, just completely goes out the window, and this will be one of the worst things that he has done throughout his entire presidency so far.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying